Welcome back, everybody. I'm Joe. This is Couch Talk, and today I'm here to talk about the movie Onward. Everything surrounding this movie is really disappointing because I was really looking forward to this movie. Disney Pixar movies usually always make money. Moana, Frozen, Zootopia, Frozen 2, Toy Story 4, Coco. These movies make money because they're universally loved as a studio by families, and families have children, and children love these movies. And the thing that works about these movies is that although they're cartoons, fun adventure cartoons with a lot of heart that appeal to children, they also all have a lot of adult themes and a lot of adult elements that may go over kids' heads, but they throw it in there so that parents enjoy the movies too, and I respect that so much. And when this movie was first announced, I thought the concept of it was brilliant because with movies like Coco is beautiful, and like you could relate to the whole aspect of this kid going, across his bridge into the underworld or whatever it is, to meet his ancestors. But it's hard to relate to it because I'm not in that situation. I like when movies give me something that I could relate with, and Onward did. I didn't necessarily lose my father or my mother when I was a young age, but I lost my grandpa, and I was raised by my grandma, so kind of was like my dad. And the thought of, what if I could bring him back for one day just so he could see who I grew up to be, so I could see if I made him proud, so he could see what traits of his I got from, my grandma's teachings, and just to talk to him, and take a ride in the car with him, smoke a cigarette, whatever. That concept is so pure, and I was really excited to see this. And then the coronavirus thing struck right around the time when this movie dropped, and this movie was well over $100 million to make, along with advertising, and it only made like $50 million because no one was going to the theater due to this crisis. Now, I understand that this crisis is way more important than, a movie. People's lives are at stake. But at the same time, cinema is a monumental part of, the world. It's a means of art and escape from reality, and in times that are this hard, it's movies and television right now that a lot of people are relying on for entertainment when they can't leave their homes. So I'm always upset when something like this happens, where a movie tanks so financially hard. All the people that put such hard work into the script, into the editing, the animations, the director, everything about it, even the actors that are portraying the two main characters in this movie. It's just really sad because in a last ditch effort, Disney was kind of like, we're gonna throw this movie on Disney Plus on April 4th, so everyone that's home right now and has nothing to do because they're quarantined, you can now watch this movie, and hopefully it'll take your mind off of the horrors in the world right now for just 2 hours. And that's a smart tactic because a lot of people do love these Disney movies. So if they haven't already signed up for, the Disney streaming service, then Disney is hoping that this will give them an incentive to. But before the April 4th release, they decided to release this on demand 2 weeks prior to the April 4th release, for everyone to buy it for $20 and watch it at home. And this was also a smart tactic because, like I said, a lot of people are home right now. They have nothing to do. A lot of people love the Disney Pixar movies. And, you spend $20, a family taking out, 3 or 4 kids, a husband, a wife, or whatever, you're going to spend well over $50-$60. Now you're only spending $20 and you get to see the movie and you're going to own it. So this was a smart tactic on their end. But the problem with that is you're also losing, like, that 50 or 60 extra dollars. And, instead of making $1 billion, you're going to make a quarter of the price, because instead of 10 people going to the movies now and spending money on 10 tickets, you're only essentially spending money on 2 tickets, and the other 8 people get to see it for free. So, they fully expected this movie to not be able to make close to $1 billion like all of their other movies, and it's just a shame because, honestly, I'm going to start with this review here. This is my favorite Disney movie in a very long time. I don't think it's the best movie in terms of how well it was made. I think Coco was a lot prettier. I think the music in Moana definitely lifted that movie up a little bit for me, and I really loved the music in Moana. I think Zootopia had an overall really, really creative idea that they really drove home. But in terms of the emotion I felt is why I think this movie is one of my favorites. Now, the problem with this movie is it's a fantasy movie. Essentially it's about 2 brothers that grow up without a dad. Only one of them remembers the dad, but the other one was too young to remember him, which is played by Tom Holland. The older brother is played by Chris Pratt. just respectively Spider-Man and Star-Lord. And on the day that Tom Holland's character turns 16, the mom says that the father actually left them a present to open for when they were both above the age of 16, and it turned out to be a magic staff. This staff has the ability to bring their father back with the use of a spell that he made for them for one day so that they could spend time with him and get to know him. Now, during this spell that Tom Holland performs, a part of the staff breaks, and they have to go on an adventure to find the piece to make this staff whole again to complete the resurrection. Now, they only have 24 hours to do this from the start of the spell, so even though it breaks, the clock is ticking. So every minute they spend trying to find this thing is a minute less to get with their father. And they go on an adventure, a quest to find this other piece, and along the way they meet other characters. And I'm not going to dive super into spoilers and all the characters they meet. If you've seen the trailer, you kind of got the gist of it. The small problem I have with this movie is they didn't really need to be like elves. Like, you could have made them humans and still had the same magical concept with the wand. I would have liked them to go all in. Like, I don't mind that it is elves and that they meet fairies in it and that they meet all these other mythical beasts and everything. But the biggest problem I had with the movie was they tried to make it like over time magic kind of dissipated and it was forgotten about. And now they all live like us, and they live in like houses like us, and they drive cars like us, and they make coffee in the coffee pot like us, and use stoves and TV. And it was like, it wasn't fantastical enough. Like, they didn't fully submerge themselves in the waters. Like, they were just dipping their toe. And I would have liked them to just go one way or the other. Make it humans that, find out that their dad was a wizard or a mage or whatever you want to call it, or go all in and really immerse this world in a fantasy element. And although the characters were fantastical and they could do all these cool things that, only people could do in fantasy worlds, the world itself felt more grounded in our reality. So there were a couple times where I kind of forgot I was watching like a fantasy thing until there were moments where I was like, oh, look, a fairy. That's right, we're watching a fantasy movie. And that's honestly the biggest gripe I have with it, that it felt like they couldn't commit to one or the other. But aside from that, the thing I love about this movie is the part that I can't talk about because it's a spoiler, but essentially everyone knows that Disney Pixar movies always has the fairy tale happy ending. That's what Disney has made themselves on. They pride themselves on presenting little boys, little girls, these very happy endings, and this is what you should strive for, and don't ever let anyone treat you badly, or you're going to meet your Prince Charming or your Snow White one day, and yada, yada, yada. This movie has a very different ending. It does not end the way you think it's going to, and it's not a bad ending. It's not a sad ending, but it's very real. It doesn't wrap it up in a tiny bow, but it makes sense, and I can't dive too much into it without spoiling anything. But the overall message of the story, there's a part where Tom Holland's character has a revelation when he's jotting something in his notebook towards the very end of this movie, and just the score and the message it's driving home got me teary-eyed, I'm not going to lie, because I've had that same experience with someone that I'm very close with. And again, I can't go into details because I'll spoil it, but I like that it wasn't that fairy tale ending. And on top of that, I'm also a nerd, so this whole Dungeons & Dragons character played by Chris Pratt, where he loves the Dungeons & Dragons game, even though it's called something different in the movie. The fantasy element, that's all my stuff, Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. So two brothers going on a quest to try and bring their dad back from the dead, which is super relatable to me, in a movie set around fantasy adventure, which are my two favorite genres in movies. It was just the recipe for perfection. And when I finished watching this movie, I honestly started it over and watched it again because I wanted to soak in everything I missed the first time around. It was really well done, really well crafted. It's a shame of what happened with this whole coronavirus thing. This is definitely worth the price of $20. I know it's probably easy to just sit there and say, oh, wait a week and watch it for free. But you're doing a huge disservice to the filmmakers that made this movie. The director of it, I'm not too sure what his name is, but I remember reading an article where this movie was very personal to him because he went through a similar experience. And I think the overall message is something that people kind of need. We can't keep getting fed these fairy tale ending stories because it's setting unrealistic expectations for children. And I think that an ending like this, it almost lets them know you're not always going to get things the way you want, but one way or another, it's going to work out. And I love that about this movie. I'm going to give this movie a 9. Honestly, the only reason I can't get it to a 10 is because I wish it was just either more fantastical or more human. I didn't like that they were trying to mix the two and it just didn't feel right to me. But besides that, This is honestly my favorite Disney Pixar movie in a long time. I can't remember the last time that I felt this sad watching a movie from Disney Pixar. Actually, Toy Story 3, when you thought they were about to melt. No, when Andy gives the toys to the little girl, his neighbor. That was the last time I felt as sad as I did now. That's how hard it hit me. Anyway, I'd like to know what you guys think about all this. Did you see this movie? Has my opinion persuaded you into buying the movie? I really hope it does. And if not, you're going to watch it on Disney Plus. You have it for free. I get it. Trying to save some money, especially since no one really knows if we're going to be making money for much longer now with this whole virus thing going around. So I get it. Anyway, let's talk about it down in the comments below. And as always, I'll catch you next time.